I joined actually Ethereum because of governance and DAOs, so that is still what keeps me interested in this space. Ethereum is an institutional technology on a scale of centuries.
To your point on community, it's so decentralized that I can walk around wearing this shirt, Devconnect.
I've been thinking recently about the minimum viable Ethereum Foundation in the sense of minimum viable products in founders speak. Like, what is the essence of the ETH in the long run? People on the streets often associate blockchain with scams. And if you have that image in your mind, you are reluctant to engage with that technology. That's reasonable.
There's less money in democracy than there is in capital, obviously.
Yeah, governance can be profitable. And I think if it's profitable, I'm not sure if that is designed in the right way.
This episode is sponsored by NIM, the world's most private VPN that protects your internet traffic and metadata. Unlike traditional VPNs, NIM uses a decentralized mixnet to scramble your internet data, hiding who you're talking to, when, and how often. You can switch between full mixnet mode for maximum anonymity or a faster VPN mode for everyday use. Pay in crypto or fiat, and even your payment stays anonymous thanks to ZK-powered anonymous credentials. Take back control of your online life at nim.com. Sign up today using the code Blockchain Socialist and get an extra month for free.
Hi, everyone. You are listening to the Blockchain Socialist podcast again, special series with me here at Devconnect in Buenos Aires. I'm with Theo Beutel. He is the academic secretariat at the Ethereum Foundation and an independent researcher at the University of Zurich. He has done some interesting research on DAOs, and I'm really looking forward to him talking about his work. Yeah, maybe, Theo, if you want to give a quick introduction to who you are, and what is an academic secretariat? It sounds very fancy.
It sounds very grand. It does, yeah. In fact, we're just two people, so that as a disclaimer. Another disclaimer, I don't speak on behalf of the Ethereum Foundation, but I'm glad to be talking about things we do.
My opinion is not my employer's, as
exactly right.
They put in the bio and Twitter.
That's exactly it. So that out of the way, yeah, I joined actually Ethereum because of governance and DAOs, so that is still what keeps me interested in this space, which is also my research subject at the University of Zurich, where we just published a paper on a digital democracy in DAOs together with Uwe Sedult, Claudia Tizzone, and Parminder. So that is sort of a side project of mine. My main job at the Ethereum Foundation is with the academic secretariat, and the academic secretariat was really born out of this ongoing activity of the academic grants round, EF giving small to medium grants to researchers to go about research topics offered around the layer one, very technical work, very core to the weekly, monthly priorities of colleagues at the Ethereum Foundation. And then earlier this year, I think the idea was to do more as an Ethereum Foundation, to realize that the technology has matured and there is more need for guiding the ecosystem to priorities. And that's taking many shapes and forms across the Ethereum Foundation and its ecosystem development cluster. But the academic secretariat in particular is, of course, looking at academic audiences. And we are actually looking at Ethereum as a socio-technical system and looking beyond this very core layer one technical work, which is, of course, very important. And there will be continue grants and collaboration with technical research. But our secretariat looks at the socio-technical system as a whole, trying to identify the gaps, research that is not yet happening, connecting researchers, and just spreading the message to academic audiences outside our bubble that there are interesting research problems for them to pick up, in the hope that we can have academia as a steward of Ethereum.
So are you saying that there is interest in funding and knowing about the non-technical side of Ethereum?
Well, a little bit, yes. And when I say there's funding, I really want to rephrase that into a call for co-funding. I think Ethereum is a powerful ecosystem of many aligned entities, and academic research is often an afterthought. So here it goes, please everybody in the ecosystem, join us to co-fund these dependencies in academic research, because we all benefit from that. And the Ethereum Foundation can do coordination, can consolidate efforts, can do, avoid free riding problems. When every one of us faces the same problem, let's say all of layer 2s face the same problem, no one individually has a strong incentive to fund it, but together we should be concerned with these cross-project domains. And technical research is often quite specific to a certain product, but when it comes to governance topics, to social science-related topics, even policy, legal theory, the culture of Ethereum, organizational theory, there are so many social science-related topics that where everybody benefits. And I think this is where the foundation and our team can coordinate a co-funding round with maybe a tiny bit of seed funding of ours, but ultimately it is a collaborative effort of Ethereum-aligned organizations, and we need your support. So
Right. So you guys tend to look and plant the seeds for larger kind of academic grants and papers that aren't necessarily just about the technical development of Ethereum, but also understanding the kind of sociological implications, for example, of the technology as well, which is great. One of the things I was curious to also talk to you about a little bit, if you could explain to recently, depending on how recent you consider recent, the EF has been making some big changes within the organization. I'm wondering if you can maybe explain a bit what's been going on and how things have been shifting a little bit.
Sure, I can share my perspective on things as a member of the ecosystem development cluster. The EF has now the protocol cluster, which is most of the technical teams. We have the privacy cluster that includes PSE and other projects. And we have the ecosystem development cluster, which has been there for a longer while, but more recently, James Smith and the management team reorientated the cluster to do more. And I think this is a much needed effort of the EF showing more presence in the ecosystem. Everyone listening probably has their experience of the EF, and there was, I think, a need for more presence, more listening. I think more listening is something we can all agree on, that EF should be out there and sense what is going on in the ecosystem. Now, when it comes to next steps after listening, I think there are different approaches and strategies what the EF should do. There's a balance to strike between the subtraction philosophy, the long-term risk avoidance, and stewarding the Ethereum brand through a bias to non-action through the Ethereum Foundation. These are my words. That is one subjective interpretation of mine, where I do see value, because Ethereum is an institutional technology on a scale of centuries. This is a long-term effort, and the Ethereum Foundation exists only once. The brand, the reputation is incredibly valuable. So one way of seeing the EF's role is this extremely risk-averse entity that is doing everything it can to preserve this long-term success of the protocol, while external entities that are not called the Ethereum Foundation would be out there and trying different things, taking more risk, and they may fail. Now, I think more recently, people came to the conclusion that it is time to dare more. Ethereum is mature. It is increasingly mature. It is more mature than many years ago. And it is a time where the Ethereum Foundation is able to dare more without jeopardizing the security, the decentralization, the independence, the neutrality of the technology. The credible neutrality ethos that continues to be the Ethereum Foundation's motto, I think allows for more interaction, more bias to action. Although we continue to be concerned about what the EF's role is, and the Ethereum Foundation EcoDev cluster has different teams with different priorities and different sort of audiences. And there is the academic secretariat, there's the institutional secretariat interfacing with larger NGOs, international organizations like UN organizations and governments. that's a very different stakeholder group than our enterprise team, our founder success team, who help small and medium businesses or corporations just guide them to L2Beats or to all these other resources in this ecosystem and help them build their products, while government and academic relations require a very different level of assessing risks and neutrality. So there's no one-size-fits-all strategy for Ethereum's EcoDev cluster, and it's a big cluster of many individuals. But yeah, I hope this helps to clarify some of the new directions we started going on.
My feeling is that probably the depending on how big you want to consider the Ethereum community to be, the vast majority of people who maybe is just a passive holder of Ether probably doesn't even know about the Ethereum Foundation, is my feeling. But I think in the maybe interesting context, I think, is the Ethereum Foundation has generally been quite conservative, fairly quiet, kind of softly guiding the ecosystem in a particular way without being too opinionated, which is kind of, I guess, been compared to like Solana ecosystem, for example, where the Solana, I don't know if it's a foundation or a company purely, I'm not so sure, but they're very active in pushing Solana out into the world. And we saw that in a couple of cringe ways with like some of the advertisements that they've been putting out, for example, and things like that. At least I haven't seen like an Ethereum advertisement in the same way that I've seen some Solana advertisements. But I guess there was just kind of like this renewed call maybe earlier this year or last year where people were kind of like, I guess, asking more from the foundation to take a more active stance, I guess, in the ecosystem.
Yeah, I think that observation is correct. I share that. I think there was a need to signal and actually be more available. And I think listening is a continuous exercise which we have to do. We have yet to find the right balance between being out there and listening and then finding the right internal stakeholder to pick up on that conversation and do something about it. As an ecosystem, as a decentralized ecosystem, it is a challenge when there is this, like in a language term, centralizing factor of the Ethereum Foundation. People outside the ecosystem assume it is the center of the ecosystem.
Right.
And there needs to be the explanation of it's in fact not, and it just happens to be called like foundations and other ecosystems.
Yeah.
But being there, listening, is a necessary prerequisite to then abstracting away the most critical thing the EF should do. I think I've been thinking recently about the minimum viable Ethereum Foundation in the sense of minimum viable products in founders speak. Like, what is the essence of the EF in the long run? And its runway is of concern, its strategic role is of concern, being capture resistant as Ethereum enjoys adoption across DeFi and other industries is of concern. So yeah, it continues to evolve.
Yeah, I mean, to your point of Ethereum being a decentralized community, it's so decentralized that I can walk around wearing this shirt, Devconnect, and only get stopped a couple of times. But, and also speaking about my shirt, you have done also some research about DAOs. DAOs being often sometimes compared to, or I guess described as kind of like the more socialisty part of the crypto ecosystem, but which is also, I spoke earlier to Eugene Leventhal about kind of our little bit malaise in the DAO ecosystem. But would you like to talk a bit about that research and the paper you wrote?
Happy to, yes. I think so. My work with the University of Zurich and its Center for Democracy Studies started shortly before I joined the Ethereum Foundation 1 year ago. We've presented the paper at Ethereum Zurich earlier this year, and then at DAVO, the European DAO workshop, which will happen again later this year. And we'll also have a second day with Metagov for practitioners. So would love to have you all there in Winter Tour later this year. DHWO26.org is the name of the conference. And the paper is really, it's titled digital democracy in DAOs. And well, the conclusion, unsurprisingly to many of you, is that there's very little democracy in DAOs today.
Darn.
Shame. But this is, I think, quite plausible. I think DAOs are still very immature. We have rudimentary technology, we have rudimentary understanding of decision-making processes, and we have early-stage communities using these three, sort of a triangle of technology, the logic implemented through technology, and the user groups. And on the other hand, beyond crypto, we've had centuries, thousands of years of human coordination. Democracy is a bit younger, still long track record of decision-making. Cooperatives have insights into decision-making processes, deliberation techniques in public governance is very relevant. Also private companies and their different governance mechanisms could be resembled by DAO governance and DAO infrastructure. It's just not there yet. I think what we see today, when we have academics looking at DAOs, some of them look at empirical data, right? What is on-chain? What is getting traction? That is heavily biased towards DeFi DAOs and layer 2 DAOs. These DAOs serve the very specific purpose of stewarding layer 2 protocols and DeFi protocols. They do, an okay job at that. DAOs are, very not mature, but this immaturity is also constrained to this very specific industry vertical and all these other use cases of Ethereum that have yet to be, reach mainstream. Their DAOs have also not yet reached mainstream because the use cases are not there. So if people say DAOs have failed, they talk about these extremely specific industry verticals, DeFi and layer 2s, and also very early stage immature implementations of DAOs. And it's an extremely hard job. Kudos out there to all the governance leads. I've been one myself at Gnosis Safe and VitaDAO, and it's an ungrateful job to insist on governance when there are so many competing interests at stake. And actually in DeFi, there's so much money to be made. I would expect the default is that governance becomes increasingly corrupted just because there's so much money at stake. Actually, designing better governance, good governance, is maybe easier beyond DeFi when there's not that much money at stake. Anyways, our paper finds that the status quo is very biased towards certain implementations, which have, the right to exist. They are interesting, often useful, but there is this room of possibilities. Coming back when you said DAOs could be the socialist vehicle, they could be. And we have yet to build coalitions of the willing, including stakeholder groups beyond crypto, who just use Ethereum as rails for their decision-making processes in cooperatives, in publicly listed companies, maybe in municipalities where their democratic deliberation process could be complemented with on-chain transparency, immutability of records, avoiding corruption. And there are certain features we identify in our papers that are often conceptual and have yet to be built. But it is important to insist on that potential because the global narrative of blockchain is, of course, heavily centered around DeFi. Even beyond DeFi, people on the streets often associate blockchain with scams. And if you have that image in your mind, you are reluctant to engage with that technology. That's reasonable. So I think we need these coalitions of the willing, just inform people who, take the technology into their communities with local knowledge, tacit knowledge of communities of theirs, build products that work for them, governance processes that work for them, and enrich this space of DAOs that is just very simplistic these days.
Yeah, I mean, my guess as to why it's so biased towards kind of plutocratic models that are common in DeFi protocols, which, oftentimes that's what they want. They want those types of things, and the reason that is because everything is so centered around the accumulation of money and profits in one way or another. And so I think that, what that has, though, is it's shifted to the direction to where that's kind of like the main place where governance is profitable, is like where there is a ton of money to be governed. which is these DeFi protocols, and therefore it is kind of like the types of governance systems that we have been seeing are the ones that capital would like to progress on.
Right.
Not necessarily like democracy would like to progress on, if that makes sense, because there's no one is kind of like, there's less money in democracy than there is in capital, obviously.
Yeah, governance can be profitable. And I think if it's profitable, I'm not sure if that is designed in the right way. I mean, governance is, I think, friction, necessary friction for diverse stakeholder groups to have a process, and that process should have been designed intentionally to balance certain priorities that each community can define for themselves. And if governance is profitable, I'm not sure if that even serves its point, because the point of governance should be to safeguard priorities that a community defines, perhaps through a constitution, perhaps through a law, whichever document or vision it is. Governance is a way of stewarding that, and if it's being used for short-term metrics, that seems like a counter indicator towards the long-term success of any single product.
Yeah. I mean, what's interesting, like, I founded a cooperative, Bread Cooperative, and everything we do is on crypto rails, more or less. Or we build crypto applications. A lot of the revenue that we get is through crypto. But we don't do on-chain voting in the same way that DeFi DAOs do. But what's interesting about it is that when we were developing it, we were struggling to find a solution off the shelf, which I was super surprised.
Right.
At the time, I was like, surely, there is someone has already made the thing that we need, and we can just take it off the shelf and apply it in ours. And we searched for a really long time. We tried a couple of things that just like, this is just not what we want. And so we had to make custom smart contracts.
Wow.
Yeah. And we had to, essentially innovate in governance because of the restrictions that we were putting on ourselves, or just like the different use case that we wanted governance to fill. Yeah, I mean, just starting to make me think. I was like, oh yeah, because like, this is not. I guess this is something that investors wouldn't really care about building, so nobody built it. So yeah, I do think that there's like a very large gap and hole of kind of not necessarily just governance mechanisms, but just like open source code that probably would have been developed if there were maybe other sources of funding, maybe besides VC and stuff like that. Not to say that everything is bad or everything was related for people to make a lot of money, but I think we've limited ourselves in terms of the depth we've been able to go in that direction versus the other.
I agree. And the only thing I would add is it's very plausible to me that DAOs today have token-weighted voting, which leads to plutocracy and often, which leads to delegation, which leads to professional delegates, often intertwined with service provision, which leads to a whole range of conflicts of interest and various suboptimal DAO designs that we see today. I think it's very plausible overall because on the blockchain you have accounts and wallets, and token-weighted voting is, I think, to date, the most robust mechanism to avoid Sybil attacks. You just have so and so much money, and you can spread that across accounts. You still have the same amount of voting power if it's token weighted. If you want democratic voting, one person, one vote, that continues to be extremely hard to implement on-chain. Now, if you fall back to mechanisms like WorldCoin or other mechanisms, they have their own ethical issues, and people debate whether their designs are something we would want to adopt at scale. I'm very cautious as well. I think identity on the blockchain is a necessary prerequisite for democratic voting, of course, but do we want WorldCoin to be used at scale worldwide? I'm not sure. We can discuss these concerns afterwards, but I think having a pluralistic identity is probably useful. We have a couple of early stage implementations there. But yeah, going back to the point here, democratic governance requires you to identify a person on chain, which comes with a whole range of challenges.
Right.
And token-weighted voting has been easiest to implement. I think the point is many protocols did not see the point of investing into democratic processes. They reverted back to token-weighted voting. And we have yet to identify these applied research groups and products who feel strongly about democratic voting through DAOs, and then optimize the product stack. There are lots of modules out there, but you're right. It needs to be much easier for the end user user groups to just fork their smart contract, including great UI, and use it.
Yeah. I mean, I will say that at least this past coin grants round, GG24, one of the rounds was handled through Privote. It was the privacy round where projects, including my own, submitted for some retroactive funding if they were kind of progressing the privacy space. So thank you for those who voted, but it was really great. I think I really liked that experiment because it was so simple and one person, one vote. And it's like implementation. It was just like they used human.tech passport technology as a way as the basis for identity, and then you had 100 votes or 99 votes or whatever that you could spread across several projects, and it did this quadratic voting computation in order to decide on how the ETH, I think it was 35 ETH in total, was distributed amongst the projects. So I think that's like the first open-ended, one person, one vote like project that I've seen, or just like attempt instance of that happening. So I think that was a nice thing to see, at least for me. And that was based on the Macy voting technology, minimal anti-collusion something. Forgot what the I was. But it allows for private voting. So it's also like anonymous, which is really great. So I definitely think that we're getting there. And this was funded by the EF. So
Right.
I don't think a private institution would have funded this, I guess.
That's right, yeah. Credits to my colleagues at the PSE cluster and the privacy cluster there. Yeah, also doing a lot of work on private voting. Recently released a report in collaboration with Shutter. So yeah, there's progress there, and also the primitives that led to ZK Passport and other technologies where you can identify yourself through passports, but in a zero knowledge preserving way that is also a step towards a decentralized identity.
Cool. Are there any kind of last parting words you would like to leave with people on your work at the EF or on DAOs and democracy?
I think when it comes to DAOs and democracy, I would just encourage anyone out there to experiment with the tech we have and bring it to new audiences and identify user groups who you think, if you're inside the community, where you think they could benefit from this, and be a bridge builder, be a translator to create this narrative that crypto can be more than it is today. And yeah, bring these modules, open source repositories to people outside our bubble and have them understand it and make use of it as it suits their needs. Because there are so many user groups out there with distinct preferences, and yeah, so that is one call to action, and yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks, Theo, for coming on. Yeah, super appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.